Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of experiments. I nearly said adventures there. Experiments in AI. So moving on through our different experiments. This one is going to be a RAG simulation, and I emphasize that because no way is this intended as a experiment in RAG. It's purely trying to illustrate the sort of things that you might want to use RAG for with a large language model, and sort of simulating that with a really simple example using a chunk of text and trying to show how to get a large language model to focus in on only the text provided and nothing else. And so in a very simple layer, in some ways, that's the point of a RAG, is that, effectively your large language model almost becomes like a command and control system, and you're using data external to the large language model to actually get the factual questions right. So that's what we're going to be doing here. Very simple experiment you can do. And of course, I'll upload the code sample to my GitHub page, and all you need to run this, and I will sort of run through this at the beginning, is some form of toolchain for running Python and Jupyter notebooks. You can install Python and Jupyter if you wanted, just those components, but I always just install Anaconda because it's got everything in it and other things I like to play around with. You will need Ollama, obviously, because this whole series of videos within the experiments in AI is all about using Ollama and models in Ollama, so you'll definitely need that. It's in the title. You can read this, you don't have to, but it is worth just reviewing it to see if you want to take these experiments further, which is what this is about. What I'm trying to do is encourage anybody that's curious about large language models, particularly like me, likes playing around with local ones and really sort of kicking the tires and trying out different experiments. You really need to go a lot deeper than I'm going here, but this to me is a sort of starting point where you can play and stuff you can play around with. You need to install the Ollama Python library because we're going to be leveraging the library to talk to the API. Now you can do it without the Ollama Python library if you want to, and I've done other episodes as part of the Gentle Introduction series where I've shown how to interact with various models, both Ollama and through, online through Google Gemini or other online resources, without the use of a particular API library. If you want to do it old school with requests and JSON, you can, but for this series I elected to use the Ollama library because it just made more sense to lean into it for sort of brevity. And you'll need some models. Now in this experiment, again, it's got this pull function which I repeat in multiple episodes, so it's just wrapped up inside, it's wrapped up the Ollama pull function, which is in their library, inside of a pull model if needed function, just as a wrapper really around that. So just as a side effect, it returns the outputs this and catches any exceptions within the context of the program. Then we need something to run the prompts. Again, pretty basic. We're using the chat endpoint, and so we're using the chat function. We're just going to feed it the model name and the role and the content, which is our prompt. And we're going to just very quick and dirty strip. Leading and following blanks or whatever. I'm trying to remember now even what. Yeah, anyway, it's just force of habit really. to strip stuff out so you don't get any spurious content. Yeah, sometimes what happens is with these returns is I have seen occasionally you just getting these sort of spurious spaces in front of and behind the return response, but not always. I think you could probably get away with not doing that if you don't have to, and probably some of my examples don't have it in, but yeah, it's quite useful for that. And then on to the actual experiment. So we're going to just use Llama 3.1. We're only going to use one model here, but we're going to, because we're testing out the ability to question. And the premise of the way this works and the reason why it's a simulation and not a full-blown RAG is we're sort of supplying, in lieu of a database system that would be present in a RAG system, in a retrieval-augmented generation system, our database is really just this line of text about the Halifax explosion. And then there's a series of questions. And then we run with the model. We get the way this is structured, and we'll see in a moment with a question, is we're going to say to the large language model, only use the text provided and answer the following questions. So we give it the text and then we say, okay, only use this text to answer the following questions. Then we give it the questions, or give it a question, and we're looping through these questions. So we've got a single text, but we're iterating through the questions and, feeding that to the LLM each time. So, okay, here's the text. Okay, answer the following question only using the text provided, and then the first one, and then it'll do it again and again and again. Then we do it a second time. And what we do this time around is, in our original, it says using only the text provided. So we're double telling it. Yeah, basically we're saying, okay, using only the text provided, answer the following question using only the text provided above. So there is a belt and braces there, but we're making sure that it really knows that you only must use the text provided. Okay. But the second one, we're taking out from the questions each time and replacing using only the text provided with for the Halifax explosion. And you'll notice with the prompt, with context, there is no prefix here. So what's getting fed in each time to the large language model is just the question for the Halifax explosion. What was the date of the Halifax explosion? For the Halifax explosion, what two ships were involved? So the difference being is that what we're hoping is going to happen is, for the first run through, all the questions should only be answered with answers that are within the text. And beyond that, two things will happen. Either it'll hallucinate, or more correctly, it'll say, oh, I don't know from what you've provided. With the second one, what it'll do is it'll base its answer on whatever information it was trained on. So if, as part of training Llama 3.1, part of that was to say ingress Wikipedia, which probably was a thing, in there it would have been an article on the Halifax explosion. And then finally, just some observations that we might want to make about what's gone on here. So yeah, the experiment starts. It pulls any models. Again, it didn't need for this one because I already had Llama 3.1. And it's going to run this RAG simulation. So if I go down a bit, let me just make this a bit clearer. Let's disable scrolling. Okay. So we've got a bit of provided context here. So we just remind ourselves of what the text is. And then we ask the large language model to answer these questions, but only from information within the text. So our large language model is becoming a sort of command and control thing where it's going, okay, all I've got to do is understand the text and understand the context of the questions relating to that text. I don't have to look up this information inside my own large language model. And as I said at the start, in a proper RAG, this sort of information, this provided context, would come from some sort of database where you've loaded up a whole load of documents and you're doing sort of, document, answering questions of documents. But it gives a good, I think, a goodish simulation of how this might work. Now, of course, with a proper RAG, you might choose to be a little bit more technical. There's other ways of possibly structuring these sort of questions, but gives you a bit of an idea. So you can go through and you can sort of cross-check this to see, is it hallucinating? Is it making a mistake? There's a question in here actually, I think, which what was the name of the strait where the collision occurred? So there's a few here where it might have trouble, determining certain things, and certain pass-throughs you might find it says, I can't answer that, or I've seen it do with this one, it actually not correctly picking out the connection to Boston for some reason. Now, what I did do on subsequent runs here, just to do things, is I did a few little tweaks, like even for this, even though it's the only text going in, just putting it inside of these single speech marks, just so it's sort of focused on even more that, this was the text that I want you to look at. So anything like that might be helpful. So is this looking outside of... so again, it's interesting to know like how much knowledge seeps in from here. I'm just looking to see... Okay, no, so it does know about nuclear weapons because of this. So so it's interesting once you sort of pull this apart and go, how is it working that out? Like what's going on here? Then we've got our one where the only preamble is for the Halifax explosion. And you can see here, it's just also included in that there. So just to remind us that there is a difference here. So now, devoid of the fact that it's not looking at the text anymore, it's now purely answering from whatever happened to get ingested into this particular model when it was trained. And so now we're getting a much more sort of detailed answer, and possibly smoke cloud. And so you get a bit more information here as well. There was one, like I say, where it did have a little bit of trouble. And hopefully it didn't accidentally get edited out. I could have made this a little bit clearer maybe. What's the name of the strait where the collision occurred? There is no record of a collision. Yeah. not a straight. So Halifax Harbour. So again, you know, like it's interesting how it's taking a slightly different approach because of the different information. That's why I thought this is a really interesting way to just simulate the sort of thing that you might see with a RAG without having to build a RAG, if that makes sense. And then you can sort of play around with different models, maybe some of the smaller ones. You might find a model that, you know, again, working out where, you know, how well is it actually just working on what information it has here, and how well is it doing that. And like I said, I've seen with some models it missed things, but it could be because it was prior to me doing a couple of tweaks with the wording on the question to make sure that it knew exactly that it was only supposed to be looking in the text, because we are trying to simulate a RAG here. We want it to go, okay, here's the, you know, the information I want you to focus on. So there we have it. Thanks once again for watching. Bye for now, and I will catch you in a future episode.